Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of the NDIS Circle. Today we're joined by someone I've known for a few years now, dating back to my days at the NDIA. And someone I've got a huge amount of respect for, Sam Hallam, the CEO and co-founder of Integrated WA, which he established alongside his wife Catherine. Sam brings extensive experience in both NDIS coordination and exercise rehab services, driven by a deep passion for supporting people with disabilities. Sam's background as a former elite level athlete has instilled in him the belief that success is only limited by one's imagination. With a wealth of experience working with young people in both the disability and justice sectors, Sam is committed to working in partnership with families, providers and community organisations to empower NDIS participants to achieve their goals. Welcome to the podcast, Sam.
Thank you, and thank you for the very kind introduction.
No worries. We've known each other for a couple of years now. Always enjoyed our conversations, so I thought it'd be great to get you on. You're a really smart guy, and you've got heaps of insight. So looking forward to hearing more about your journey. So I thought I'd start off with the big one. What's your mission and purpose, Sam? What gets you out of bed in the morning?
Yeah, I think right from day dot for us, it's probably been a couple of things, and I guess shifting the expectations or perceptions of what people with disabilities are capable of within the community is a big one. And then primarily for us, it's setting up opportunities, which can be broad and specific to the individuals, and making sure that, as a provider and, clinicians working in the space, that, we are working towards individuals' goals in line with obviously our clinical goals and direction, but really sort of driving home that, the people with opportunities have or it's our job to create opportunities for people with disability.
Awesome. And what led you into the disability sector? Like, I know a little bit about your work history. Share a bit more about your personal experiences growing up and how you sort of found yourself working in this sector.
Yeah. So in terms of my background, so I'm an amputee myself, and I lost my leg at the age of 12, and through post leaving school and different periods, I've worked within the disability sport and rec sector, and obviously worked in a more rehab setting at different points. Up until 2016-17, I hadn't actually been in the disability sector for the best part of a decade. I'd been working in construction and construction management and a range of different roles, and I was pretty burnt with construction, and thought I'd get back to some fundamental passions, I guess, for me from an employment perspective. And that just happened to coincide with the NDIS starting and being really in its infancy in WA. Some opportunities opened up in that space, and took what I thought was going to be a sort of a part-time role and working back in to decide my next step. And fast forward 7.5, 8 years later, or whatever it is now, here we are.
Firstly, I didn't know that you used to work in construction. And obviously I mentioned in the intro, but I got off your website that you've previously been involved in sport. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, a big part of my own personal rehab journey, I guess, post-injury was facilitated through sport and recreation. I was fortunate enough that I was able to compete at a international level as part of the Australian downhill ski team. So I was part of that squad for a number of years, and raced, World Cups and European Cups and different things all across the globe, which was a pretty amazing experience. And a lot of, taught a lot of fundamental lessons from other athletes, performing at an elite level with a disability. So yeah, was fortunate enough, and that's always been a big passion, and it's sort of a big driver, I guess, for me in terms of creating opportunities. The sport's one aspect, but I think the social and that peer support networking and group is one of the really big positives that comes out of any pursuits in that space.
Yeah, I think it's so interesting. I was reading an article on LinkedIn the other day about I think it was related to the Olympics, which are obviously on in Paris at the moment, but related to the crossover between, a lot of athletes then go on to have quite successful business careers, and there's some transferable skills around like continuous improvement and always, 1% better. And have you found that, like, obviously being involved at a high level sport and now you're a business owner, there's some transferable skills there, or like a mindset that's quite similar?
Yeah, I think that determination is one of the bigger things, in terms of, looking to, quite often working as an athlete and even as a business owner, you're very outcome focused, which, as you grow and mature, and you learn to temper that a little bit. But I think, that dedication and that drive and really having that single focus is probably one of the biggest crossovers. And, despite knocks and bumps along the way, you're generally pretty resilient to get back up.
And you mentioned, so you're working in construction, then you came over to disability services sector, you're working as an employee, you mentioned to me before at ActiveLink, and then you transitioned now with your wife Kat to founding Integrated WA some years ago. What was behind that transition where you decided I want to become owner of the business rather than employee? What occurred there for that mindset shift? Because it's a huge leap and a huge change to make, isn't it?
Yeah. Look, we were operating, or I was operating pretty autonomously at that point anyway, and I guess there was a few things that were popping up for us in terms of like the work we were doing and opportunities. One of the big things for me personally was with the introduction of the NDIS, I did see that there was a fantastic opportunity to do things a little bit differently in terms of service delivery, and sort of move away from some of the ways that historically the sector had operated and delivered service, being a little bit more creative, being a little bit more flexible, obviously making sure that things are person-centered. I guess for me, that opportunity was probably too great to pass up, and really sort of to challenge some of the expectations and of the sector and push forward in a new way to make the most of the NDIS was probably one of the big driving forces.
And how's that transition been for you? What's that experience been like? Is there anything that surprised you becoming a business owner? Lots through the same journey. So,
Yeah, look, lots. It's been possibly one of the steepest learning curves, and I guess we haven't stopped learning, even with, through periods of growth and things like that. The expansion of the business and different things, there's always things that we're developing and learning. A number of things that I didn't expect to be dealing with or didn't foresee to be dealing with that you have to as a business owner, and sort of managing, obviously, a system that was continually changing throughout the period of our business. I think there was some things, because I'd worked, at sort of senior levels within other organisations. I had seen a range of challenges that those businesses were facing. And so one of the things when we set up, I tried to, get ahead of many of those things before we started, so that they weren't issues that I was having to deal with within Integrated. But having said that, those growing pains and learnings just shifted slightly and then became in a completely different area.
I think if you're not trying to improve and you're not learning, then you're probably not really doing it right, are you? And what I've found is, because you're a good people that are promoted, or they decide to open their own business because they're very good at what they do, like a trade, or being a business owner is an entirely different set of skills, isn't it? And you have got to be some HR knowledge and some financial knowledge and ability to manage staff and support people, and then you've got to have knowledge of the specific skill that you're delivering. There's so many different things. You've sort of got to be across everything. It's entirely different skill set. Would you agree?
Yeah, it is. And I think in those initial couple of years, that one of the focuses for me in terms of looking at that growth was trying to find, that balance of best delivering on my skill sets, and then looking at those around us within the team, and trying to get the right people in that had the fundamental value set that Catherine and I share. And so then, and listening to that feedback of the team as well, and trying to learn and sort of shift and be a little bit agile where possible. Didn't always work out as you learn. There's things that always bob up, but generally we've tried to take on that feedback where possible and sort of help redirect or steer the business to make sure that we're delivering in line with what we fundamentally set out to do.
And you mentioned recruiting people that share your value set. How do you go about finding people? Is there sort of some specific attributes you look for? How do you go about that recruitment process?
Yeah, look, from that perspective, there's, fundamental personality traits, drive and ambitions are something that, are pretty set within people. So finding out, learning a little bit more about what people are about and what they do and why they're choosing to work within this sector is a big thing. The system itself, I've always very much had an approach that we can teach the system. You can learn, many of the aspects of the NDIS, But, fundamentally as an individual, we need to try and find the right people. And again, that sort of mix between, from our perspective as a business and the staff hasn't always ended up where we would hoped. That's a challenge. And I think probably in the last 12 to 18 months, some of the core fundamentals have come back into, I guess, what people are looking for from an employer. I think in a period there when the NDIS was growing so fast, the sector, there was unlimited opportunities. There was people just sort of chasing a little bit of, who's going to give me the most, I guess. And I think there was, a couple of year period there where it was quite challenging because people were only sort of looking for, I guess, financial salary. There was multiple opportunities. There was multiple approaches to staff on a weekly basis and things like that. And so we just sort of tried to focus on, those core fundamentals of what we do as a business. And then we want people to come along with us in that journey and deliver the best outcomes for participants. And if that impacted growth or, certain elements of the business, then, I saw that as my job as the CEO of the board general manager of the business back then, to really navigate that and make the most of what we're doing as a business to make sure that those that were within the four walls were driving home, our fundamental message.
Yeah, it's that, what's that saying? Like, hire for attributes, train for skills. It's like, the personality and approach that someone takes is often ingrained, but systemic, how the NDIS works, how to understand a plan, how to, deliver this or that. You can sort of train and upskill people on some of those aspects, can't you? So could you give us a bit of an overview of integrated WA role, what services team provides?
Yep. So we're a capacity building organisation. So we provide allied health. So we've got OT and physio. And then additionally, we have the positive behaviour support team and then the specialist support coordination team. So we focus in on those capacity building areas. It's where our strengths always lie, or always has lay. And we've tried to stick to that. There's been obviously multiple opportunities to branch out and go in different areas, and we've tried to stay true to that capacity building. And I guess coming back to the fundamentals is, our role as a team is to provide participants and people with a disability within the community the opportunity. It's our role to, prepare them as best we possibly can to take on those opportunities and sort of respond or break down any barriers that they may face to engaging. And then ultimately, it's about, us directing service in line with what their goals are, and making sure that, again, we've done everything possible to allow them the opportunity to take up or, to achieve their goals more so than coming in with a predetermined idea of what they should or shouldn't achieve. Yeah,
awesome. And how do you focus on keeping that quality piece in such a fast-moving environment? Often, specialist support coordination therapy, a lot of it's based around that billable hours model. I think some organisations, it's a challenging environment to also, maintain productivity, of course, to have a sustainable business and to also keep that quality high. What role does professional development and training, how do you really prioritise quality at the same time as prioritising sustainability as well?
Yeah, and this is a massive balance, and it's probably as the NDIS keeps shifting its direction or potentially shifting direction, it's a never-ending challenge that we all face, I think, running a business. There's a couple of fundamentals, I guess, that we've come back to. One of which is that we do have to consider the businesses, the level of importance. We have to keep the doors open. It has to keep operating, and that's not only to provide, the services that clinicians want to deliver and the opportunities then to participants, but it's also then being able to have the resources to allocate, time or money towards professional development and sort of those upskilling or to take on different areas of interest. So we've done a lot of work again in the last sort of 9 to 12 months around establishing, and this is again a continual process, establishing the identity and the interest sets and the skill sets within each individual team. So that's ongoing. And then working to our strengths as well has been something we've always tried to come back to. So look, it's certainly challenging. It's not easy when, there's murmurs of direction changes, but there's nothing set in concrete. And then you're trying to plan for a future that's pretty uncertain. But at the end of the day, we're there for the participants. We're there to support them as best we can. And we've got to be creative and innovative with the way we deliver our services, irrespective of what the funding looks like for them, to target and get the most out of the system that we work in.
Yeah, and leading on from that, we were having a chat this week, I think, around the uncertain future for support coordination. There's this recent NDIS independent review has recommended that the scheme transition to a navigation model. That's a pretty big part of your business. How are you standing the transition? How are you approaching it? How are you planning for it?
Yeah, look, it's an interesting little period because there's conflicting information as well around the importance of that role for participants and families and guardians. It's all good and well saying that it'll be centralised, but until we know more detail around exactly what that looks like, it is a little bit hard to sort of commit in one direction. I guess where I got to, until we know exactly where that's going, I can't really listen to too much of the surrounding noise because it's very speculative. So what I did is I looked back within the organisation and looked at the skill sets that we've got and the team that we've got within integrated at the moment, and looked at those skill sets, those interests, and then I've gone out in the last six or so 9 months to actually look at other opportunities in other areas where they can still impact the people that we work alongside. At the end of the day, there's, irrespective of the system or the brand or the badge that sits over the funding body, there's the core of it is there's a lot of people that still need varying levels of support within the community. And so it's our job my job to be creative and innovative and making sure that we can still find ways to deliver them the services that they need. So, diversification has been a big key point based on the skill sets that we've got internally, the areas of interest, and sticking to what we know and what we do well. And then whatever the government chooses to do with the NDIS, I can't really control too much. I've just got to be agile enough to respond once we do get a final direction.
Yeah, that's right. It's internal, external locus of control. Like, I've sort of come to a similar place, I think, as you, whereas it's like a balance between so much noise out there at the moment as to what the future's going to look like, and everyone different things or has a different opinion. I think it's blocking out some of that external noise and continuing business as usual, but also at the same time not having your head in the sand either, and sort of being aware of what's happening and trying to at least do what we can within our control to plan for the future and ensure we can continue in some respect.
One of the areas of focus for me in the last 6 months has also been coming back to community and looking at the other areas, or the other businesses, or, I guess, relationships like, what we have, where you look to create, a more collaborative approach to the delivery of service. You look to support each other, share resources to a certain extent as well, and actually create a bit of a support network within the sector. So then, I guess it creates some opportunities for us to be a little bit more robust as a collective, should the changes come in, and who knows what opportunities might pop up from there. So I think, everyone had their, head down and bum up for the first few years, and we were trying to keep up with the system, and you were looking, quite internally, from a lot of perspectives as a business. I've sort of trying to lift our head a little bit and look back to that community and look at the other stakeholders that are funded away from the NDIS to still be able to support participants. And then if changes or cuts do come to the NDIS, then we actually have the networks created to still make sure that services are being delivered and needs are being responded to within the community for our participants.
Yeah, that's what stuck out when we had a conversation last week. Like, that need isn't going away. That need for coordination, that need for case management, whatever you want to call it, isn't going away, particularly for people with more complex needs that have these large stakeholder groups interfacing with multiple government services, the NDIS, child protection, health, justice, etc. While the funding frameworks may change, the way that businesses need to do business may change, that need isn't going away. So yeah, like you said, making sure you got the skills and you're agile enough to be able to respond to that is probably all we can do within our control at the moment. And you also spoke last week about some of the capacity building programs you're involved in. We were meeting with WADSA. Can you talk to us a bit more about that and some of your partnerships and you mentioned forming some more connections, strengthening those connections with other organisations?
Yeah, I guess when we looked at it, you know, and we've always had a very big focus, or always tried to have a focus to take very much a step down approach to the capacity building services that we offer. So where it presents upskilling, you know, the informal support networks that sit around a participant, whether that be, you know, stepping programs down, therapy programs down to support workers, family members, but then, you know, one of the other big key areas for us is integration with the community. So finding ways to set a participant up and have an opportunity to create their own informal support network, particularly socially and things like that, is pretty important. So one of the things that has, you know, become apparent is that, you know, some of the community organisations out there don't necessarily have the funds or the resources, you know, to be as present and explore different areas. So I guess a part of our role is making sure we, where possible, facilitate those links and make sure that participants know what available opportunities are out there for them with community organisations. So we're working quite hard where we can look at getting cohorts of individuals together to be involved in different programs, whether it be sport and rec or, you know, even things like housing, social community groups, getting out and doing activities. You know, we're trying to increase our knowledge and presence in those areas as well, so we can forge a few more links for participants. And I guess, you know, we're safeguarding them to a certain extent, giving them other supports and networks and building that a slightly more robust informal support network. So then it means that if capacity building services or coordination services start to get pulled back, you know, over the coming years, that they've still got access to the supports they need, and you know, there's degree of oversight and direction that can be provided by those community and informal support networks.
Yeah, and just you're talking about informal supports and community connections, community organisations. I know you've, over the last few years, you expanded out into the regions and remote areas of WA. Like, how's that experience been? There's not many providers that have sort of ventured out into those areas, and it's such a thin market in, you know, areas like the Pilbara and the Kimberley. Yeah, what's your experience been like?
It's been eye-opening, you know, and it's been one of you know, again, a learning experience for us as an organisation. Yet at the same time, there's an element where it's come back to really base fundamentals for a lot of the participants that we support in the regions. You know, simply having access to supports or being able to have support networks structured for them is massive. I think within the first 12 months of us going into the regions, the team that has gone up, I gave them a simple focus, and that's to try and establish trust and engagement. I feel that, you know, a lot of people in the regions have been burnt by providers in varying different ways. Fundamentally, it came down to a couple of behaviours for us in terms of, you know, listen, consider, and then adapt and sort of put into place, you know, actions and follow through for the participants, because they're the areas that, you know, getting feedback from the community seem to be lacking. It's growing, you know, for us as a business, but we also, you know, we've made sure that the clinicians that we've got in the regions or going to the regions are actually prepared and equipped with, again, an understanding and a knowledge base specific to those areas. So again, it's quality has come, you know, as a priority over growth, and that's always going to be integrated approach, and the approach that Kat and I will continue to take.
Yeah, I remember the one experience that sticks out for me is when I was at the NDIA a few years ago as a planner and putting together this plan for this young woman in, I think, Derby, and it was a couple of $100,000. Checked the plan 3 months later, and there wasn't a single cent that had been spent. It was pretty naive at that stage. I hadn't been up to the regions, and then my first job after leaving the NDIA, we travelled to remote Aboriginal communities through the Pilbara and the Kimberley, and it's sort of the penny dropped around. You know, it's not necessarily a funding issue here. It's a community connection. It's a community. It's a market issue in these areas.
Yeah, and look, we obviously, so we've been providing services to Broome for a few years now. More recently, Derby and Fitzroy Crossing have come in for our behaviour support team, and similarly, our approach to sort of establishing that connection and engagement within the regions. We've put in a lot of time for us to learn, I guess, and speak with the community, listen to the messaging, listen to what the needs are, and then try and adapt our approach to that. And Kat, obviously, she's overseeing everything in the regions. She's going up there on a regular, sort of 4 to 6 week basis, depending on the need, with a small team. And she'll continue to go into the regions to make sure that we've got, our ear to the ground, for the communities, and then bringing it back, and the two of us sit down and look at, how we can adjust as a business and make that investment to allow services to continue, because it is pretty thin. People fly in and fly out, and at the end of the day, the participants are the ones that are left with unmet needs. And if you're going to make the commitment to the region as a business or as an individual clinician, then our expectation is that we actually do everything possible to follow through with that.
Yeah, awesome. Do you have a success story of someone you supported, perhaps in the regions, or that you've been able to make a really positive impact on through Integrated?
Yeah, look, there's a few, definitely. Probably one that sticks out was one that's popped up more recently. We've been working with a lady through the Midwest for a number of years, particularly complex situations surrounding her, and not only her disability support needs, but social and engagement needs, and interactions with multiple departments. And what we've managed to do, and a long-standing history of not accessing services. There was a number of risks as well for service providers going in, so a lot of providers weren't willing to go and seek to provide this individual services.
Yeah, I think a lot of business owners are feeling uncertain and scared. Future, of course, there's so many changes, and it's a difficult environment to operate in. But what I've been, this sort of collective providers joining together, reaching out to each other, it's been pretty supportive. And I think this sense that it's everyone together as a sector, it's perhaps brought us together a little bit in a way. Because we're all going through a similar shared experience. So, Sam, it was so great to talk to you, so great to have a conversation. I really appreciate you coming on, and wish you and Integrated and Kat all the very best for the future. Sam, thanks everyone. See you next week.